hot midday in the heart of the savannah. A group of researchers and documentary filmmakers ventured deep into the wilderness to capture the daily lives of animals. One of them, a young cameraman named Alex, set up his camera and stepped aside to capture a panoramic view. He had no idea that yellow eyes had been watching him from behind for some time. A lion emerged almost silently from the tall grass. Its steps were soft, its movements slow but confident. It approached Alex closely, and at one point gently placed its paw on his shoulder. The guy flinched in surprise, but felt no aggression. The lion just stood there, looking at the camera lens. It was as if someone who couldn't speak was trying with all their might to show something. After a few seconds, it took a step to the side, turned around, and looked at Alex again. It wasn't just a glance. It was a call. Something was happening nearby, and the lion wanted the man to see it. Alex followed the lion across the scorched savannah. Dust rose beneath his feet, and the heat seemed to weigh heavily on his shoulders. The lion never once turned around, but walked slowly, as if he knew the man would not fall behind. Finally, he stopped. In front of them was a small depression in the ground, surrounded by dry bushes. Alex approached and froze. In the hollow, on the dry ground, lay 2 lion cubs. They were too thin, with sunken sides and weak, barely audible movements. One barely moved, the other just lay there, as if it had lost the strength even to breathe. Alex felt a stab in his chest. He knelt down. The lion also lay down next to the cubs and gently touched one of them with his paw. Then, slowly, as if gathering his courage, he looked up at Alex. It was not the gaze of a predator. It was the gaze of a father, filled with longing, fear, and a quiet plea. You can, so you must. Help them. Alex stood motionless, staring at the emaciated lion cubs lying in the dust. 2 of the cubs were very weak. Their sides were sunken, and they barely moved. Nearby, a few steps away, sat an adult lion, silent, sullen. His ribs showed through his skin. He glanced briefly at his cubs, but looked as if he were powerless. Apparently, he had not been able to find prey for a long time. Alex took out his phone. He dialed the Wildlife Protection Service number. His voice was tense but calm. I found 2 lion cubs. They are very weak. Their father is nearby. Apparently, he hasn't eaten in a long time, and they have nothing to eat. They are just lying there. I think they need urgent help. The operator asked for the coordinates. Alex quickly dictated the location and was told that help was on the way, but it would take about an hour to get there. He knew that was too long for such young cubs. He knelt down and took a small piece of dried meat out of his backpack. He held it out to one of the cubs. The cub moved its muzzle slightly and, barely opening its eyes, began to chew slowly. The adult lion looked at Alex for a moment, then he looked away again. It was as if he understood that this man was doing more for his children than he himself could. After a long, tense, and agonizing wait, a saving silhouette finally appeared on the horizon. An Animal Protection Service jeep slowly approaching along the dusty road. Alex waved his arms excitedly to attract the team's attention. The vehicle stopped, and a group of experienced rescuers poured out, carrying medical equipment and supplies. The rescuers quickly approached the lion cubs, assessing their condition. One of the cubs lay motionless, barely breathing, while the other tried to lift its head, but barely had the strength to do so. The medics began a thorough examination. They took their temperatures, checked their breathing, and assessed their level of dehydration. The adult lion stood nearby, breathing heavily, watching closely. His eyes expressed a mixture of anxiety and hope. Sometimes he growled quietly, as if warning the rescuers to be careful. Despite his strength, he seemed vulnerable, realizing that much depended on his cubs now. One of the rescuers carefully placed a bowl of water and a small amount of food next to the lion cubs. The medics exchanged glances, realizing that the fight for these cubs' lives was just beginning. Alex stood nearby, feeling hope rise in his chest. Help had finally arrived, and now everything would be different. The rescuers worked quickly but carefully. First, they loaded the 2 lion cubs. They were weak and barely moving. Then they approached the adult lion. He was struggling to stand on his paws, but he didn't growl or back down. He just stared at the people, as if he understood that resistance was futile. One of the employees slowly approached and administered a mild sedative. The lion swayed slightly, then collapsed to the ground. Several men carefully lifted him and placed him next to the lion cubs in a specially prepared compartment of the vehicle. Alex closed the door. He knew that now everything depended on the doctors. The vehicle sped along the dusty road. An hour later, they arrived at the veterinary clinic. The doctors were already waiting. The cubs were immediately carried inside. The adult lion was placed on a stretcher and connected to a portable IV. Inside, there was a smell of antiseptics and medicines. "You're just in time," said the veterinarian, examining one of the cubs. "We'll do everything we can." Alex stood at the entrance and watched as 3 emaciated bodies disappeared through the door. He had done everything he could. Several weeks passed. The lion cubs grew noticeably stronger. Their fur became smooth and shiny again, and their eyes regained their sparkle. They played happily with each other in the clinic's spacious enclosure, no longer resembling the exhausted cubs that had once been found in the dry savannah. An adult lion was recovering in the next room. His condition was serious, but thanks to constant care and nutrition, he was gradually coming to his senses. The doctors approached him cautiously, changed his IVs, monitored his breathing, and cleaned his wounds. He rarely made a sound, but when he heard the cubs' voices, he would raise his head as if checking to see if they were nearby. Alex visited them several times. He stood behind a glass partition, watching the cubs play or the lion get to his feet. During one of these visits, he and the adult predator made eye contact. There was no fear or aggression, only fatigue, and it seemed gratitude. Finally, the day everyone had been waiting for arrived. Early in the morning, the lions were loaded into a special transport and taken far away to a protected part of the savannah. The vehicle stopped, and the rear door opened. First, one lion cub hesitantly stepped out, followed by the second. They looked around, sniffing the familiar hot air. And then the adult lion appeared, tall, calm, and more confident. He stood next to the cubs, as if taking on the role of protector once again. A few moments later, the trio disappeared into the tall grass. None of them looked back. Alex stood at a distance, not approaching. He knew he had done everything he could. Now they were home.